is the North American service broadcasting on 17.70, 15.42, 12.05.
How you will worship him to death.
What have you done to its eyes?
The next time you're frightened in the dark, don't scream.
They are not what they claim to be.
You're listening to Radio.
You know what be rocking this shit right here. Roller, 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 work it. Roller, 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 roller. Come on.
Come on. Hello there.
Hello.
Hi.
Hey, I was just listening to some Limp Bizkit. What's up?
I know I can hear it because we're in this little tiny coffin together and you're just being really inconsiderate about how loud you're being.
Well, I'm on top. I'm the top level of the coffin and I get the aux cord, so.
Okay, well, you know.
It doesn't reach down to you.
I think it would just be polite to ask what I want to listen to.
Keep rolling, rolling,
I need
rolling, rolling, what?
Well, if we're going to listen to Limp, can it be Nookie?
No.
Why?
Welcome back to Radio Grave.
Hello, welcome back.
No argument from you.
Okay.
No nookie.
That's okay. No Nookie, I get it. I'm here with Dom.
I'm here with Amber.
Who's rolling, rolling, rolling.
What? Come on.
And I'm Nookie.
I'm here with Nookie, and I'm here with Roland.
Exactly. Well, today we have a great little episode. Every episode we have is great. Every topic we have is great. I'll say that every single time. I have a certain connection to all of these because I have dumped my entire being into researching and studying these topics. And today, this one's a little bit sad. But actually, it's a lot of it sad, but it's kind of obscure in the sense where I had never heard of it.
I had not either.
And then I read about it and I was like, wow, this is a tragic story, but this is really interesting.
Yeah.
Love it.
And then I busted.
A nut?
Yeah.
Jesus.
I love a good sad story.
Well, our sad story begins in a place that's actually kind of happy.
Disneyland?
No, Switzerland.
Oh, same thing.
And it's an unbelievable place. I've never been to Switzerland. I've never been to Europe, but Switzerland is a pretty nice place. It's famous for the Swiss Alps, Gruyere cheese, Toblerone chocolate, and Omega wristwatches, which I've never owned a wristwatch, but you know, I think it's more for show
status symbol
and status, but you know.
So's Toblerone. Mm-hmm. Roll up to school, be like, guess what I have?
This
Toblerone.
It's
I'm
like
fancy.
$4. I'm rich.
I don't eat Kit Kats.
You're poor.
You're fucking poor. I have a Toblerone. Give me your math notes.
Give me your math notes. There's a socioeconomic divide in this school, and you need to understand your place. You're a Kit Kat, and I'm a Toblerone. Anyways,
Christ.
my whole fucking school years. Anyway, Switzerland is described as being one of the few happiest places on earth. Mm-hmm. And Switzerland has a reputation for having cultivated a culture that surrounds a love for nature, polite and reserved behavior, pride in a strong and driven work ethic, as well as an active and healthy lifestyle.
Sounds fucking miserable.
Swiss values are simple: honesty, sobriety, cleanliness, and selflessness. While much of the population is religiously conservative, many citizens boast themselves as politically progressive. And Switzerland's motto is unity, yes, uniform, no.
That's fun.
It's fun, but we'll come to find out it's not true.
Okay.
Switzerland was crowned the most developed country in the world by the United Nations in 2022 due to having the longest life expectancy, a thriving mixed economy, well-regulated universal health care, and an inclusive tuition-free education.
Love it.
Fuck Switzerland for me not being there. While being a proud capitalist country, they simultaneously have a robust social support system to ensure the health and prosperity of their citizens.
Sounds like commies to me.
Sounds like commies.
Sounds like commies.
Sounds like commies for sure. Switzerland is known to be a peaceful country. One of their main principles of foreign policy is Swiss neutrality. This policy has been self-imposed since 1515 and was solidified after the Napoleonic Wars. The Treaty of Paris would be signed by the great powers of Europe in 1815, and this treaty protected the country from inviolability, as well as recognizing a role in neutrality, which relieved any involvement in political or armed conflicts to continue to promote peace within their borders. Geographically, Switzerland is a landlocked country squeezed in the middle of Germany, France, Italy, and Austria, and Switzerland is roughly the size of New Hampshire and Vermont combined. Because of its size as well as location, Switzerland's demographic of spoken languages are diverse. About 60% of the population speaks Swiss German. In a small southern portion of Switzerland, you will find a speaking population of Swiss Italian. In some of the east, you will hear Romanche, a Romance language that is descended from Latin, the official language of the canton of Grisons. In the west, towards the French border, also referred to as the La Suisse romande, you will find a speaking population of Swiss French, the second most spoken language in Switzerland of 23%.
That's pretty high.
Yeah. In La Suisse romande, there are a number of cantons or states. One of these cantons is Fribourg. In the Gruyere district, where the cheese was originated,
Hell yeah.
you will find the capital of Fribourg of the same name. Today, the population of the capital of Fribourg is only 38,000, but was around 25,000 at the turn of the century when our story begins. So, 24 miles south of Fribourg,
Myself.
24 miles south of Fribourg, you will find a very small community consisting of 4 villages: Romanus, Roudière-Treffet, Salé, and Malé. In 2001, this community of villages would be combined into a single municipal township, proclaiming the collective name of the largest village, Salé. Later on, Salé would also adopt the village of Sionge, which consisted of just a small group of houses.
Cool village, dog.
Right.
It's 3 houses.
Right. The combined population of the merger was no more than 1,400 people by the year 2010. Swiss French is the official language of Salé by a landslide, reporting that less than 5% of the population speaks something other. The town of Salé only covers about 7.5 miles of land. It's really small.
Yeah.
This land consists primarily of fields and agricultural farmland, but in the east of the town, you will find a sizable patch of thick woodland consisting of beech, spruce, and fir trees. This forested area makes up about 20% of Salé, which is almost 1,000 acres of unspoiled woodland that was theirs to enjoy.
Yay.
This woodland would be named the Malé Forest, after the village of Malé, which was literally only about 1,200 feet away, edge to edge. Malé, just as small as the other villages, contributed a population of 325 to the total 1,400 of Salé.
So, sizable, but still small.
I mean, not necessarily. Maybe 325 people is
Out of 1,400?
out of 1,400.
Sizable for the town.
Sizable.
Is what I'm saying.
I think it's about a fourth of the population.
Yeah.
Sionge doesn't even count.
It does count. It's 3 whole houses. Stop. Although the community was quiet, close-knit, and incredibly private, the villagers of Malé, as well as all of Salé, would begin to whisper of something strange lurking in the forest. A figure so bizarre that it would begin to manifest an ever-growing dark cloud of fear and anxiety over the entire town that would last over a decade. It's unclear when exactly these sightings began, but it is known that some of the first to report their sightings were children in the late 1990s to early 2000s. Since Salé was, and still is, a very safe community, it was expected for the local children to enjoy the outdoors as much as the adults, oftentimes without the need for supervision. Kids would do what they do best while in the woods: build makeshift forts, play hide and seek, sword fight with sticks, and allow their playtime to be filled with imagination. So, when children began to report sightings of a dark, cloaked figure walking in the woods, adults dismissed it as just make-believe. Advanced studies in children's developmental psychiatry not only debunks the wild imagination theory, but has proven that children are more likely to experience unfamiliar people, places, and things with heightened observation abilities, and are able to notice and recall details much better than adults. We spoke of this in our Sandown Clown episode. Adults would think there was nothing to worry about. They knew their community was closed off from outsiders, and there was, quote, nothing to fear in Salé. That was, until around 2003 when adults also began to cite the ghostly figure in the woods, validating their children's sighting, turning their silly stories into a bewildering reality. The figure seen by adults was the same which was described by the children, a large, dark humanoid with a cloak. Witnesses would state that the ghost traveled quietly in the shadows of the thicket, never being seen on the well-traveled paths and trails. Villagers became convinced that the spectre was destined to walk the earth for eternity, possibly for the sins he had committed when alive. These sightings of the enigmatic figure would be incredibly rare at first. Not all citizens believed the rumors, turning a speculative blind eye to the more superstitious population. How could they consider the existence of a strange creature haunting the woods without seeing it for themselves? Over time, this mindset would change, and eventually, the ghost would earn a new name. The locals would begin to call him Le Loyon. Loyon.
Loyon.
The origin of this name is unclear. When translated, it has virtually no meaning, nor does it have any relations to surnames, fictional characters, folklore, religion, cities, towns, villages, landmarks, anything like that.
It's just,
It's just Le Loyon.
I kind of thought about it as being similar to like the American, the rake, which is like the woodland monster that is just called the rake. It's not named after anything. It's just that.
Yeah. With increased sightings of Le Loyon being reported in the mid-2000s, so grew the belief of his existence. The superstitious members of Salé began to harbor fear of not knowing why he was haunting the Maules forest. They began to speculate what his intentions were, and a growing concern of whether or not Le Loyon was malevolent was a common topic. Some even began to question if he was a harbinger of death. While some were still skeptical, everyone would be shocked when sightings of Le Loyon would prove that he was not a ghost, but a stranger with a very disturbing appearance.
Right. And it may seem obvious as we began this episode that he was a person, but they truly believed that he was a spectre.
Right, because people were seeing him, people weren't seeing him. He was dark and in a cloak, and he was creeping through the forest just on the edges.
And people were like, no, he doesn't exist. No, he does.
Yeah. If it was a person, you'd see him walking around.
I mean, there's only 1,400 people who live there.
Yeah.
And no one else uses that area except for them and like people they know.
And little kids playing.
Right. So they were like, fuck, what is this?
It's a ghost, a demon, perhaps a robot.
Right. But now we know it's a stranger.
It's a guy.
It's a person. So as people began to see him more, they would describe him as not looking great.
Well, we'll see. We'll see if I get a boner. Begin.
We'll see. He was unusually tall, anywhere between 6 to 7 feet.
Okay.
He wore a dark-colored boiler suit or sometimes overalls. Okay. He wore military gear, giving him an extra element of intimidation. This included black tactical boots and a dark green or camouflage cape with a hood, but this is likely a military-style hooded poncho. If you were to look that up, you'll see exactly what it is, and it makes sense.
Yeah.
He was reported to wear gloves that were sometimes described as leather or rubber. If the weather was rainy, he was also known to wear a cab hat, which is kind of cute.
Yeah.
But the most terrifying of all was his face, or the lack thereof.
He didn't have a face?
Oh, no, he had a face. Le Loyon was reported to wear a military-style gas mask.
Oh.
Time and time again, witnesses would all say that the mask was antique-looking, and they all speculated the mask to be a model from as early as the 1920s to the 1930s. Many early styles and designs of antique gas masks aren't necessarily consistent with witness description. Dark face, rounded dark tinted glass eyes, and a snout respirator. It is also not mentioned whether or not a tube is featured, but we will assume not. The style of gas mask, often depicted in renditions and sketches of Le Loyon, share an eerie similarity to the popularized design of the GM30 and the GM38. So, I'm gonna be real. I spent a lot of time on gas mask Wikipedia because I really wanted to get a very good idea of what exactly this mask looked like. Mm-hmm. And we'll include a photo on our Instagram of what we think, or at least what the style is that we think.
Yeah.
So The GM30 and the GM38 are styles that are often featured in video games, movies, and TV shows, as it's incredibly recognizable because of their relation to an infamous era. The GM30 and GM38 were German military and civilian issued gas masks manufactured and used by the Nazi Party during World War II. The likelihood of La Loyon's gas mask being Nazi-era memorabilia is incredibly unlikely, but a European World War II gas mask was the most possible. The Swedish TYP-4 was a civilian-issued mask from the early 1940s. This fit the mask's description perfectly, but a 1950s model gas mask designed and distributed by Switzerland, the GM53, also features a dark shaded face as well as round, lightly tinted glass eyes.
So I was just about to jizz until the Nazi stuff came. Sadly.
The Nazi stuff is not great.
No.
And you may be wondering why these details are important. I find that the era and design of La Loyon's gas mask not only paints a better description of his appearance, but also gives us clues as to where he was actually from, the possibility of his age, and maybe even what kind of person he was, as we will later discuss.
If you enjoy our content, please rate, review, and consider becoming a patron by visiting patreon.com/radiograve. You can also support us with a one-time donation by visiting buymeacoffee.com/radiograve. Your patronage and support helps us continue to create content for you. You can stay up to date with us by following our Instagram account, Radio Grave Podcast. Thank you for listening. By the early 2010s, to the dismay of the residents of Salé, Le Loyon began to show himself with confidence. As these sightings were reported, the fear of the mysterious Le Loyon grew. Sometimes he would not be spotted for weeks at a time, easing the anxieties of locals, only to be followed by a concentration of sightings. Le Loyon would sometimes appear multiple times a week, or even multiple times in a single day. Not only was he beginning to show himself more, but he was beginning to appear on well-traveled paths and trails, no longer walking in the shadows of the woods. Le Loyon was incredibly quiet and would often appear quite suddenly. He was known for standing motionless out in the open, just staring back at gawking spectators. So, very horror movie.
Yeah.
He was also known to surprise hikers by walking out of the thicket or tall bushes to cross a trail or path. He never acknowledged the reactions of the frightened witnesses.
Yeah.
Also very horror movie.
Yeah.
Wishing to remain anonymous, a mother would recall her experience while walking with her family. She's quoted saying, "It scared my children. He came out of the woods with his military clothes. We saw neither his face nor his eyes behind his big dark gas mask. It was scary." Another resident would report, quote, "On a very hot Sunday morning, there were 3 of us near a picnic spot. Suddenly he came out of the forest fully dressed in coveralls, a chemical white suit, and wearing his gas mask. The child who was with us was scared." A family driving close to the Maules forest would witness Le Loyon as well. The father stated, "We stopped to watch him pass. He had a kind of diving suit on, a gas mask, and was holding a bouquet of flowers in his hand. We were not reassured, so we quickly got back on the road for fear that he would be aggressive." Another local, named Marianne Desclous, told of her run-in with Le Loyon, which came in the spring. Quote, "It was a rainy Sunday. He had a cap, a dark cloak, and his gas mask. What could possibly be going through his head? I don't know, but it was unforgettable and unpleasant. I hope I don't run into him again." Desclous would also mention that Le Loyon was holding a bundle of flowers picked from the woods, or something similar to a plant box with some sort of foliage and wild flowers. Desclous was so disturbed by the event that she declared she would never go into the woods ever again. Soon, residents began to notice that Le Loyon had a routine. Rumor was that Le Loyon could be seen walking almost every Sunday on the same path, usually multiple times a day. To see if this rumor was true, villagers would walk the same trail to see if he could be spotted. And true it was. Le Loyon would often quietly pass by dumbfounded onlookers week after week. The Maules forest was cherished by Salé. It was once a little slice of serenity, a beautiful patch of woodland safe for families and their children to play, hike, and enjoy the outdoors. But because of Le Loyon, women stopped walking alone in the woods, and children were forbidden from even going near any patch of woodland. The Maules forest was soiled, and a dark cloud of despair hovered over the woodlands as well as all of Saleh.
I find the fear aspect and like, I'm trying to think of the right thing to say because I don't want to sound offensive. I find it like, this is our woodland. This is our space. But I also understand why they are afraid.
I guess. I mean, do they have police? I mean, this is the 90s to 2000s.
Yeah, they had police.
Why don't they just be like, hey, there's this weirdo?
We'll get into it.
Okay, good. So, the fear of Loyon began to morph into anger. Everyone agreed this stranger was taking things too far.
Was he?
By walking near them.
He looked a little scary.
Yeah, he looked scary, but he was despised by the residents of Saleh. They publicly expressed their disgust, sickened that he was so comfortable with scaring little children and women. He had been terrorizing their community for nearly a decade and was showing confidence in escalating his presence. This stranger was no longer welcome in Saleh.
Yeah, things were really ramping up in Saleh at this point, getting closer to the late 2000s, 2008. Shit kind of gets a little bit excessive. Although the presence and overall appearance of Loyon was extremely unpleasant, his behavior wasn't. His sightings did invoke fear, but Loyon never exhibited any violent or perverted inclinations. He always kept his distance and he never pursued or followed the hikers, unlike what many people thought. But his demeanor was always calm and non-threatening. All the reports are like, he's coming after us. People would be like, well, what did he do? And they were like, well, he stood there and then he walked away. You know, he was never like puffing himself up or charging people.
Yeah.
It's very much
like he walked near us.
Yeah.
He crossed our path.
Right.
It's like, okay.
The only threatening details ever mentioned in the encounters with Loyon always tied back into his shocking stature and choice in apparel. He was just tall and was dressed fucking militaristic.
I mean, that's
a little scary. I'm here. I understand.
I was gonna say that's what I wish I was, but go on.
That's who you wish you were and who you wish to date.
But I'm short and don't own a gun.
Yeah. I don't think Loyon owned a gun either. More often than not, Loyon would ignore spectators, never really acknowledging them, as if he wasn't interested in engaging or interacting with hikers whatsoever.
Dream boy for sure.
He was not known to wave, nod, or speak to anyone. He never spoke. He was often reported to be the first to nonchalantly turn his back and walk away. So, from an outsider's perspective, obviously, Loyon was not a threat. And like I said, I think they were being a little excessive, a little dramatic about it. I understand that it had been like 8, 9, 10 years of this happening. But at the same time, in that 8, 9, 10 years, there was never an attack. So while police intervention was demanded for years, there was very little they could do.
Yeah.
Without any reports or proof of aggressive or menacing behavior, Loyon was determined to be doing nothing wrong. He was only guilty of looking creepy.
Preach to the choir, brother. I know it.
Right. But local authorities were keen to get in touch with Loyon, as they wanted to reassure their constituents' fears. The times when police would attempt to find him were always fruitless. Loyon seemed to disappear without a trace every time he was pursued.
I mean, God, he's getting more and more charming by the minute. Avoids the police, doesn't talk to you on the trail.
Right.
Tall, dark, and military looking.
You have to chase him. He's not going to chase you.
I'm going to chase him. Here I go.
A municipal...
Steal his flowers from him.
A municipal Forest Service official named Guy Savary would say... Savary.
Sorry, I'm hitting the vape when I'm pronouncing French because, you know...
How could you?
I forgot. Savary.
Savary would say...
Savary.
Savary. I don't know. He would say, quote, "The situation is delicate because we basically have nothing against this person. But since he arouses these fears, we are going to hold a meeting to see if we can find a way of locating him and discouraging him from behaving as he does." But over the course of 10 years, police never made contact with him once. Failures.
Yeah, I mean, how hard is it to find a dude who's always around, to be honest?
Right.
And you can't miss him.
They're like, he's on this trail
really
every
tall.
Sunday. He's on this trail every Sunday multiple times a day.
We just can't find him.
And then they go and they're like, well, we've been here all day, so...
he's not doing anything wrong. He's like, ugh. So by the year 2012, Loyon was on a fast track to becoming Switzerland's very own Loch Ness monster. For what reason, who fucking knows? The urban legend of the Ghost of Maules was beginning to spread its way across Freiburg, but one single event would cause Loyon to go viral across all of Switzerland. I almost said a local non-hiker. A non-local hiker would be responsible for causing an uproar of unwanted public attention to Salé and Loyon after having his own run-in with the ghostly figure. The witness would anonymously submit his close encounter story to a French-Swiss news tabloid called Le Matin. The hiker claimed he was traversing the trails and paths of the Maules forest with his family when they came upon Le Loyon. His testimony from Le Matin: I had heard about the creature, and a cousin... The creature.
I know.
And a cousin had told me that he had once seen it from a distance. I did not know whether or not the story was true, but I myself ran into it on Sunday afternoon near the peat bogs. I approached. I was about 10 meters from it. It had a military cape, boots, and an army gas mask. An older model, I believe. It was over 1.9 meters tall. It stared at me and then turned its back on me and walked quietly away. He or she, for that matter, was not aggressive. If I had been alone, I would have approached him to tell him he scares children and needs to stop. I didn't have the chance to do this, though, since I was with my own children who were very scared. I had to reassure and comfort them until he left, so I stayed cautious and I just took a picture with my phone when he left. You never know, maybe he's just a crazy guy. The anonymous hiker also submitted the photo he had snapped of Le Loyon to Le Matin, and to this day, his picture would be the only known image captured of Le Loyon, the Ghost of Maules. This publication would stir up a whirlwind of events. The confirmed sighting and proof of Le Loyon only made the residents of Salé's lives even more tumultuous than they were before. In addition to Le Loyon's reign of terror, quote-unquote, the community would quickly be flooded with curious tourists and paranormal investigators looking to see Le Loyon themselves. A local farmer went on to say, quote, families simply won't go into the forest anymore. No one here finds this story interesting or funny.
Right. They're like, get the fuck out of here. Like, literally only like 1,400 people live here.
I want to see the ghost. And they're like, no, we don't like this guy.
They're like, no, this is terrible for us. And they're like, this is fun for us.
Yeah.
This is like a fun investigative thing. And it's...
All the while, dude is in the woods like, Jesus fucking Christ.
Right.
Can I walk?
Right.
Can a man walk? Why are you taking pictures of me? Tension grew with the influx of outsiders in Salé, and the residents were preparing their torches and pitchforks, metaphorically, of course. With police unable and possibly unwilling to help regulate the Le Loyon manhunt, creature hunts, an element of danger became present, but not to the tourists or the residents of Salé, but to Le Loyon. During this time, Le Loyon would not be sighted once by any tourists, paranormal investigators, or residents. That was until 2013.
Right. And this is sad. This is sad for me. The year of 2013 would be the last time Le Loyon would ever be seen, but not in the flesh. A group of hikers would come upon a strange discovery in the Maules forest. At the base of a tree, the hikers would find a neatly placed stack of items. A long trench coat was folded along with other clothing. Rested upon the top of the garments was the face of Le Loyon, the infamous gas mask. A delicately folded piece of paper would be found hidden beneath the mask. This piece of paper was a written letter from Le Loyon. Within Le Loyon's letter was a very saddening message. So, just to preface this letter, it was written in French, and some translations of this document are spotty. With the help of multiple sources, we have been able to paraphrase the letter to be more palatable to our listeners instead of the broken up, muddled translation available online. We have not left out any important details and have only replaced some wording and vocabulary to make Le Loyon's message a little more cohesive. So, the letter is titled, The Death Certificate and Final Will of the Ghost of Maules. Quote, Dear Patrick of La Matin, not only are you a moron, a stupid person, but you are an assassin above all else. You have murdered a very harmless being who found therapy in his walks, real happiness. a cerebral resource allowing him to face the responsibilities and vicissitudes of his normal life. For there were many troubles to face. The ghost cannot explain the happiness and the tranquility these walks of solitude have given him. You obviously do not seem to know the works of Sacher Masoch. You will discover that it takes an effort in this society to make a positive difference in this world. And so, you are an assassin of freedoms. Your publication has regressed us into the Middle Ages, an era of witch hunts. Why don't you rise up against the little toads, helmets and balaclavas dressed in leather who backfire on their motorcycles, disturbing these same forests? They're the real violators. Do these offenders take the time to kneel in front of their little oratory, praying for a better world? I terrorize children? Don't make me laugh. Children should be terrified of reality, afraid of the horrific crimes that they see on TV and in the media that are happening in the real world. Who is in charge of advocating for tolerance and freedom in this country? These beautiful notions are wasted on criminals, only benefiting drug dealers, pimps, thieves, rapists, and hooligans. Switzerland is small. The belief that anything that is not in accordance with the, quote, garden gnome must be eradicated. I thought to myself, for all of these years while I was unbothered in my solitude, that maybe these closed-minded beliefs were evolving. But now, sadly because of you, there is proof of the opposite. So, the phantom disappears. The risk of a hunt for the beast is far too great. He will come back to haunt the narrow minds of your kind, because ultimately the ghost will never die. To the friendly walker or mushroomer who will discover my tinsel, deliver this missive to the syndic or even a journalist capable of spreading the message of freedom and tolerance in whatever way they are able. In this letter, he speaks of a little oratory, and he's referring to the little oratory Chapelle de la Vergenza. And it's a really tiny open pavilion with only 4 pews and stained glass windows. It's in a very lonely location, and it's right on the edge of the Maules forest with a view of the mountains. So he's referring to why aren't these people or these locals that are just as much criminals as me going to the little oratory to pray? You know, if that's what you're looking for, if that's who you're expecting everyone to be, why aren't these people going to the little oratory to pray? I feel like I had to explain that because there is a belief that maybe he was going there to pray and there was no one ever there except for him. So, instead of following Le Loyon's wishes of passing this letter on to the town officials of Salé, or a, quote, real journalist of political activism, the letter ended up in the hands of the one news source that had no business further involving themselves in the tragedy of La Loyon, the tabloid La Matin.
So fucked.
They're like, let's send this to La Matin, even though he literally just said,
You killed me.
You killed me.
Yeah, I can't enjoy my life because you made me into a,
right,
a fucking pariah.
Literally.
I should give this to them, you fucking cock.
So fucked.
Le Matin would continue to print articles about Le Loyon after his letter and belongings were discovered, and in many ways, their decision to do so was so incredibly tasteless.
Yeah.
They are just a tabloid, though. They're not a real news outlet.
No. I know why they're doing it, but they shouldn't be doing it.
Yeah, agreed. Not only did Le Matin print Le Loyon's tragic letter in full, but they would also go on to print many other memos and letters from the community of Salé for all of Switzerland to see. Le Matin would quote residents expressing their overwhelming joy for Le Loyon's departure, claiming the entire town came together for a cheerful and indulgent celebratory event. One resident's reaction was included, them exclaiming, "It's incredible news!" Fuck you.
It's kind of disturbing.
Very.
Especially since he's like, this is my death certificate and final will.
Yeah.
They're like,
because everyone
thank
hates
God.
me and I thought everything was turning around, but you made everyone hate me again.
Right.
And they're like, yay, we hate you. You're dead.
Yeah.
Fucking assholes. So, although the majority of the town was excited, there were a few who were saddened and disappointed, some even expressing sympathy for Le Loyon. Le Matin would include a letter from an anonymous resident. It reads as the following. Quote, "Farewell from Maules. The explosion of the orange newspaper Le Matin will have stirred the inhabitants of this community, as well as all of Gruyere and possibly across the Atlantic. The presence of a man in a gas mask and military pilgrimage in the woods of Maules, as described in this scandal press, will not have been without effects and consequences. For many years, he has been walking in our region without ever looking to contact or threaten anyone. Perhaps scary and surprising for some people, there has never been evidence of violence submitted to the municipality or the police. Since Le Loyon's media coverage, the feeling of insecurity grew and the curious-minded showed themselves. We'll never meet him again. Indeed, Le Matin would respond. Le Matin would go on to also include a letter from a member of the municipality that also expressed sympathy for the situation. Le Matin would preface the letter as such, quote, "It is the opinion of many that this letter was an attempt to improve the image of the Council of Salé for mishandling the events leading up to the eventual morbid declaration and disappearance of Le Loyon."
Can I just say before, Le Matin is directly responsible for this. It's not the officials of Salé.
Right.
Even in his letter, he says,
Dear Patrick
of
Le Matin.
Of Le Matin. It's really bizarre. Not really bizarre, but it's really disgusting.
Yeah.
That
fucked.
They're like, well, it was really Salé, and they're trying to cover their asses now. Yeah. It's like, it's because of you. Oh my God. I hate Le Matin so much. Sorry.
Damn you, Patrick.
Blowing out my microphone.
I fucking hate it so much. Shaking. But no, I do too. Fuck these guys.
Yeah.
So the letter reads, that supposedly is Salé trying to defend themselves.
Yeah.
The letter reads, "Farewell, the Ghost of Maules. I sincerely hope that our society can continue to advocate tolerance and freedom, which I believe in as well. We easily tend to lose importance in the face of self-interest, futility, and egoism. May your wisdom in the face of these events allow for an awareness of the importance of tolerance and freedom, and a hope your message can lead to a serene and fulfilling community life for all. Farewell, the Ghost of Maules. We will never be able to meet again, but I wish for you to find a new escape and a path to treat the vicissitudes of life. I wish you the peace and happiness to which you are entitled to. Jean-Marc Piguet, trustee of Salé." Le Matin would never report about Salé or Le Loyon again, simply moving on to exploit their next victim for their own personal gain. And of course, Le Loyon would never be seen ever again.
I do appreciate the letter from the trustee of Salé.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that it is sort of like, I think you do deserve peace. I think you do deserve,
of course,
these things. And we recognize that we were entitled and we were afraid for no reason.
Yeah.
But they kind of skirt over the fact that there's a possibility that he is gone forever because he's dead. They kind of just say, well, we hope that you find something in the future.
Well, I think that they're saying that to his memory. They're being like, we hope now that you're dead, you're walking somewhere nice where people won't bother you.
That kind of makes more sense.
That's how I took it.
I should have taken it that way too, because I think you're right. La Loyon was peaceful in nature, but this element of La Loyon was always overlooked. All that could be seen was his bizarre appearance, but not the many bouquets of wildflowers he had collected in the serenity of the Maules forest, a clear showcasing of La Loyon's gentle and benign nature. La Loyon was not a monster, he was a person. After 10 years of wandering, La Loyon felt it appropriate to leave his belongings behind in the woods he loved so much, detaching himself from the menacing identity that had been forced upon him by a closed-minded community. He had to leave the Ghost of Maules behind. It was not until the topic of La Loyon's health had been taken into consideration when the town officials of Salé decided to address his departure with a gentle and understanding hand. La Loyon suffered in his private life from the social rigidness of Swiss culture. La Loyon was a man in need of support and acceptance from his community. But instead, his departure was gleefully celebrated, regardless of the possibility that he was dead. The suicide of La Loyon has always been speculated, but has never been proven. Today, La Loyon is tenderly recognized as a gentle symbol of peace, and his identity remains unknown.
I feel like this is a good time to remind the listeners that if you are feeling alienated or othered, or you're just in a situation where you feel like you have no choice but to give up or to, leave in one way or another, just remember that there's always help and resources available. If you ever feel like you're stuck, you're not. And I feel like this story of Loyon, at least for me, is somewhat relatable as someone who has always dressed kind of fucking weird, and looked weird, and always been kind of othered within any community I've been a part of, regardless how similar I looked or acted, or it's very easy for someone in that situation to feel like there's no solution.
Especially if you're really mentally ill.
Right. It's very sad. It hits close to home for sure.
Yeah.
But
there is help.
Absolutely.
You can always call the Suicide Prevention Lifeline.
Yeah, that's 988. And a quick Google search as well if you need a specialized kind of help or advice. There are a lot of resources out there for you. So just want to remind the listeners of that. You don't have to be a ghost for sure.
I agree. When it comes to Loyon and mental illness and what kind of person he could have been, there are a lot of theories, and we're just going to talk about a few of them that I found in research to be the most likely, and I'm also going to denounce a few as well. So go ahead and take it away, Dom.
So some speculate Loyon may have been a doomsday prepper. In order to understand why this is commonly believed, we have to take a closer look at Switzerland's history, as well as all of Europe, to get a better idea of what exactly a culture of fear looks like. Amidst the violence and chaos of World War II, Switzerland would suffer from a number of accidental aerial attacks, regardless of their country's neutral status. Switzerland would be victim to nearly 70 aerial attacks, all by Allied forces. Going into the Cold War, the fear of imminent doom and nuclear destruction prompted Switzerland to take action. Today, there are an estimated 20,000 military bomb shelters as well as over 360,000 communal civilian bomb shelters in Switzerland. Even though they are neutral, the Swiss government has made an effort to ensure every citizen is entitled to shelter in case of a nuclear war. Switzerland is also home to the originator of the Red Cross movement. The symbol of the Red Cross is designed after the Swiss flag and was founded by Jean-Henri Dunant in 1863. The 1986 Chernobyl. The 1986 Chernobyl nuclear disaster spread radioactive contamination over 40% of Europe. While Finland, Norway, and Sweden were affected the most by this spread, Switzerland was still exposed to the radioactive wave. It had almost been 40 years of perpetual fear caused by the Cold War, and now the irreversible damages of the fallout was at the forefront of every European's mind. Russian nuclear physicist Vasily Nesteryenko had declared the death toll was likely to be in the millions, and 60% of Europe would be uninhabitable for hundreds of years if the Chernobyl nuclear meltdown was not contained. Thankfully, the Chernobyl meltdown was contained, but the aftershock of the event not only devastated Switzerland, but all of Europe. In the year 2000, the Swiss government funded and raised a number of therapy camps to provide treatment to the still living victims of the Chernobyl nuclear disaster. This was an effort to prove to the victims that their pain and suffering had not been forgotten. 16.5 million francs, so $26.4 million US dollars in the year 2000, was funded by the Swiss government, and the funding and treatment continued into the mid-2000s. The 2001 World Trade Center terrorist attack, followed by the 2003 U.S. invasion of Iraq, would send shockwaves internationally, yet again beginning a new era of fear, destruction, and war that was highly publicized and debated all over the world. The possibility of a person who suffers from emotional fragility and existential dread with the fear of violence and war would likely feel absolutely exacerbated by 60 years of nothing but death and destruction. With a disgust in the cultural shift of fear-mongering and praise of violence, as well as a distrust in a government that seems as if it had turned a blind eye to the deterioration of a society centered around love, peace, and autonomy, would absolutely affect a person suffering from depression, anxiety, or paranoia, and would likely lead to an overall decline in mental health.
I think that maybe he could have been a perfect example
Of that.
of that.
Yeah.
I feel like this totally makes sense due to his letter and also due to his military garb. Someone who was afraid of nuclear war or chemical warfare would be dressed in tactical gear or a gas mask in case they were out in the open and exposed.
Yeah.
This just makes sense. I know it maybe doesn't make sense to people who might be listening, but it makes sense in a way where that's how doomsday preppers are. Mm-hmm. They have to be ready at all times in case something happens, because when it happens, you're not going to be prepared for it. That's the whole point.
I totally understand personally. I'm not a prepper or anything, but I can relate to that level of daily fear and vigilance. Mm-hmm. I haven't lived as long. It's still a scary world.
Yeah.
And I was raised very fearful. Mm-hmm. I was raised by fearing parents. And I have a myriad of anxiety and panic problems. And he walks around with his gas mask on. I keep my hair cut short in case someone tries to kidnap me or hate crime me. You know, I don't wear high heels because I might need to run. And he witnessed all of this violence and fallout and war and danger and hate.
Right.
And so he's like, shit, I mean, this is happening all around me.
Yeah. And when it comes to his age, I believe that he's probably older than 40.
Yeah, I could see between 40 and 60.
Or older. He very well could have been a young person, but this sort of belief and this sort of like involvement with doomsday prepping is not as common as it is now. It's insanely normal to see this kind of stuff, especially in young people because of the society we live in today. But when it comes to, you know, the 2000s, this was something that was probably deemed to be even more unusual than him existing in general.
Right.
So he could have been a young person, but I think it's unlikely.
Yeah, agreed.
Definitely older than 40. Because at least in 2000, he would have been born in 1960.
Yeah, I could see that that level of paranoia would be from someone who was born and raised in a world that wasn't as dangerous.
Yeah.
And then over the decades seeing all of these events.
Right.
And then becoming really fucked up over it.
Right.
And having the level of awareness as these events happen. You have to have been an adult at that time and then growing into someone older and fearful.
Right. And he also was extremely, in my opinion, and in the opinion of others who are actually having a conversation about Loyon and who he was, believe that he was an intelligent and well-read person. He was educated.
Seems like it.
He was educated. And I'll tell you why I think that and why others think that too. His letter was written in French, which doesn't, say much, but it's been noted that due to the vernacular and particular style of his writing, it was certainly his native language. So it suggests he was probably born and raised in France, not the Swiss romande. And also he could have very well, as an adult, moved from France to Switzerland because of their neutrality. In his letter, Loyon mentions the Austrian writer Sacher Masoch, and claims it is obvious his works are not well understood or even known by his persecutors. So this tends to puzzle people and often leads them to suspect that Loyon was actually more of a deviant or pervert or was involved in some strange form of BDSM.
Way to assume.
Yes. Way to assume because you don't know what the fuck you're talking about.
Love that for people.
Yeah. So the psychiatric term masochism was invented and non-consensually named after the literary Leopold von Sacher-Masoch by his contemporary, the Austrian psychiatrist Dr. Richard von Krafft-Ebing.
Krafft-Ebing.
So masochism is defined as such: the pleasure or sexual gratification derived from the infliction of pain, punishment, or humiliation. I'm 100% certain that Loyon was not a masochist. And this dishonest narrative is to be entirely blamed on a poor and generalized misunderstanding of who Sacher-Masoch really was. So let's talk about that. Leopold von Sacher-Masoch was a Galician-born Austrian nobleman and writer born in January of 1836. He grew to fame from the popularity of his many romantic novellas focused on Galician culture and way of life. He showed a deep interest in the cultural diversity of Galicia and would later write dozens of short stories and novellas that would display Maysoc's ability to portray the picturesque view of different ethnic groups, praising and appreciating their art, languages, values, and more. Importantly, Maysock was one of the first writers to ever draw a realistic and proud literary image of the Jews of Galicia, as well as all of Europe. Maysock proudly fought against anti-Semitism his entire life, both in his literary work and socially. He was a humanitarian with a strong belief in socialist ideals and believed in creating a utopian future where all people are celebrated and welcome. Based. So unfortunately, Maysock's life work of activism and social justice would fall to the wayside and eventually into oblivion after the popularity of his 1870 novella Venus in Furs. Venus in Furs is a story about a man who confides in his friend that he has developed a secret fascination with cruel women after he dreams of the goddess Venus wearing nothing but furs. In an attempt to help, the man's friend instructs him to read a manuscript that entails a memoir written by a man named Severin. In this memoir, Severin falls deeply in love with a woman named Wanda, who does not love him back. Severin is infatuated with Wanda and demands her to allow him to be her slave. After she refuses his persistent begging, she eventually gives in and takes him as her slave. Wanda soon discovers she likes having Severin as a slave and comes to embrace her ability to overpower him. As her slave, she renames him Gregor, which I guess is a generic and common servant name. So she's like, fully like, your name is Gregor now, slave.
Hell yeah.
I guess it's like I think it's a derogatory.
Yeah.
Obviously. So over time, Wanda begins to become more and more cruel to Gregor, and in turn, Severin comes to realize a sexual gratification from the abuse in which he had never experienced before. At one point, Wanda recruits a trio of, quote, large African women to come and dominate him as well. And so the relationship becomes mutually beneficial. Wanda continues to embrace and enjoy her newfound power in her ability to enact cruelty and control of her slave, while Severin's pleasures are fulfilled not only by serving the woman he loves, but by the eroticism of submission and punishment.
Nice.
Hot. Eventually, Wanda loses interest in Severin as a submissive and begins to pursue another man, ultimately breaking Severin's heart. He not only declares he would never submit to a cruel woman ever again, but also that women will never be equals or true companions to men, and that they will only ever be servants and slaves themselves.
Okay.
He kind of took a turn for the simp.
Fucking incel.
Incel simp.
I will never serve a woman again. Never. They'll fucking mean.
Right. Wanda obviously really fucked him up beyond repair.
Yeah.
And while Maysock was a well-known humanitarian and was all about sympathy and equality, he seemed to have an ill-fitting streak of misogyny.
Everyone has their thing, I guess.
Right. There supposedly is an abundance of misogynistic themes from some of his other novellas, but there is also obviously a pattern of crisis between love, sex, desire, and deviancy, while also judging the social hierarchy of gender roles in 1870. So many interpret Venus in Furs as nothing more than Maysock's erotic self-expression of devious and misunderstood sexual desires, but it is truly something much deeper. While the main themes of Venus in Furs revolves around female dominance and sadomasochism, there are also elements that challenge one's perception of love, power, and sex. It is highly believed that Maysock was inspired to write Venus in Furs off his own experiences with love, power, and sex. Maysock would end up writing Venus in Furs shortly after having an affair with his friend and fellow writer, Fanny Pister, which is not a good name.
It's a fucking name. Jesus.
Fanny Pister.
I'm Fanny Pister.
I imagine she's like a cowgirl. I don't know why. I feel like that's a very
maybe because Pister is like pistol.
Yeah, I think so.
Pister, I barely know her.
Pister, I barely know her.
Pistol, she's my mistress.
Right. So this affair would become publicly known after Masoch signed a contract with his lover declaring he would be her personal slave for 6 months. And not only that, but he gladly participated in a very suggestive and erotic photograph with Fanny Pister.
Nice.
In this photograph, Masoch, this is literally a photograph.
I'm going to look it up in a second.
Yeah, and we'll put it on the Instagram. Masoch is submissively posing himself at Fanny's feet, staring up at her amorously while she casually lounges on a sofa, adorned in fur and jewelry, clutching a whip.
Badass.
Yeah. This is 1960, I
Fuck
think.
yeah, dude.
Or 1860.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So, yeah. It makes sense that a natural-born, proud, submissive simp like Masoch would be wishy-washy on his true love-hate of women.
Sure.
A man who wants to be dominated and controlled by women in a society that is controlled and dominated by men seems like it was difficult for him to balance. I think he was really confused.
Sure. Yeah.
So, because of von Croft-Abing's decision to derive masochism from his name, which, by the way, they were contemporaries. And he was like, why the fuck are you doing this? Like,
they're literally like peers. And they're like, hey, I named this shit after you, dude.
He's like, what
why,
the fuck?
Why would you do that?
He's like, this is like deviant. Like, even though he was public about it, he was like, you're ruining me.
Right.
And Masoch was now only associated with a term related to the bizarre deviant perversion that was considered a mental disorder. His life's work would become diluted and ultimately forgotten. Venus in Furs is the only remaining well-known piece of work, while not a single one of his other novellas has ever been printed in English.
That's a fucking shame.
Yeah.
It really is.
But I do want to read Venus in Furs. So, of course, Loyon was referring to Sacha Masoch's humanitarian writings of acceptance, tolerance, and freedom of self-expression, not masochistic tendencies or desires.
Yeah. In the context of the letter, it wouldn't even make sense for him to be like, clearly you don't know anything about BDSM. Like, are you fucking stupid?
Oh, they're like, well, he was wearing maybe leather gloves and like plastic. You know what I mean? It's just reaching so hard of trying to paint him as someone who was possibly deviant, because people can't imagine someone being mentally ill. You know, it's always has to be scarier than what it is. And it's just misinformation. It's just spreading fucking terrible information that's just not true. It's not difficult to not do that.
Right.
And I implore you to not do that.
Right.
It really does not take a lot of effort to just be curious and read a little deeper into who exactly Sacha Masoch was and what he's talking about.
But you have to remember also that these people see man who look different, hate man.
Hate man.
Not very fucking smart and not very critical thinkers.
No.
So,
and it's just a perpetuation of perversion.
Yes.
And that no matter what, he was doing something wrong. And he really wasn't. You know, and I'm not trying to be an elitist. I'm not trying to say these things and be like, I cannot know something and not say it. I cannot know that Sacha Masoch is well known for his humanitarianism and not mention it and just go with the flow and say, oh, he was a pervert masochist and that's what Loyon was, because that's what everyone else is saying and it makes it more interesting and more disturbing.
yeah, I don't care.
It's just not true. I'm going to say what I think is the honest truth.
Which is that this was a nice, reserved, fearful, intelligent man who was constantly fucked in the ass by everyone around him.
Whoa.
And not in the BDSM way.
No.
However, if you're interested in being a slave for Amber, feel free to email us at radiogravepodcast@gmail.com. She is in the market.
I am not in the market, but if you are into masochism, sadomasochism, or BDSM, you go.
You go, girl.
You go, girl.
All the
boy.
power to you, absolutely.
Girl, boy, them, they.
That's that cool shit.
And obviously, like, when we were talking about this, just to be totally clear, when we were speaking about it, it is viewed as a perversion. It's viewed as a mental illness. We do not hold those beliefs.
Absolutely
you can do
not.
Whatever you want. I don't care about your sexual proclivities. Do whatever you wish. I don't care. But this is how people have perceived this because other people are prejudiced. So
yes, we use deviancy in not in the way of us thinking that it's deviant.
Yeah.
It deviates from what people perceive as normal.
Exactly.
Obviously.
So
pardon the connotation.
Right.
Spit in my eyes.
Spit in my eyes. So our conclusion, really is that Loyon suffered from advanced symptoms of untreated mental illness. There's no need to speculate on what exactly. He just really clearly needed help. His bizarre assortment of military-grade clothing, I think he just thought he was going to find himself in a
Emergency situation. Sure.
And he wanted to be prepared and protected. I think it's fair to say that before the advancement of Loyon's mental decline, he probably liked to spend a lot of time in the forest, and he probably liked to spend a lot of time in nature. And in true Swiss fashion, he would continue to enjoy his daily walks, but with a little more protection than before.
Yeah.
I don't think that he wanted to do this to scare people or to, you know what I mean?
Not
I think
at
he
all.
just wanted, like he said, to have a moment of clarity, a moment of comfort. It's also clear that Loyon was an introvert and he might have been a hermit.
Mm-hmm.
And this could possibly explain why he never knew what Saleh really thought of him. And for most of the years Loyon walked through the Maules forest, no one ever spoke to him, and he never spoke to them. So how was he supposed to know?
Right.
There is possibility that he was clueless of his reputation, or at least the reputation he had developed over the years, until La Matin's publication went viral. His existence would be shared on TV, the radio, newspapers, and of course all over the internet. So eventually I think it was going to get back to him.
Yeah.
So he was exposed. And not only that, he was just learning that not only was he absolutely loathed by locals, but there was a strong possibility he was going to be hunted. There is a possibility that he may have moved away, but there's also the possibility that he actually did commit suicide, like we spoke about before.
I personally think it's more likely that he committed suicide. I mean, in one way or the other. He either actually killed himself and was like, wow, this world is fucked. Bye.
Well, and also in research, because it's just unsubstantiated, because it's only coming from a single source that is not trustworthy, there is some information that claims that the locals of Saleh eventually discovered who it was, and they'll never actually say who it was, but they knew. They want to protect their identity, and they're never fully clear if this person is still alive or not. But they are pretty clear that they want nothing but privacy. They don't want people to talk to them about anything. And it's all in the past. I think that there's an element of shame,
From the townspeople?
I think that they feel ashamed.
They should.
They should. Because this is just terrible. It's a terrible, sad story, but Loyon is...
Iconic?
Iconic.
Would you say so? I would.
I would say he's iconic. We will be including the single photo that we have that was taken by the hiker, the non-local hiker.
Yeah.
And we also will include a couple other photos. We included the little oratory, which is really sweet, actually. Saleh, and some of the forest is also going to be there. We'll include the gas mask, pretty much everything, just so you can get a better idea of what we're looking at.
I will say that the photo of Loyon really speaks to exactly the kind of person he was out in public. He's wearing his long military poncho. It's camouflage, and he's walking away. He's in the distance and he's leaving. He's oh God, there's someone there.
And that's a zoomed in photo too.
Right. He's in the distance.
He's in the distance. He was far away and he turned around and was walking away, and he decided to take a picture of him.
Yeah.
And that's the only picture that they have. But it fits the description perf.
Good man.
That's the story of Loyon.
The Ghost of Maules.
The Ghost of Maules. Damn. Thank you so much for listening.
Yeah, thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening so much. And we'll catch you next week for another story, another iconic figure, or another iconic story. We just hope that what you get from this is
be nice, you cunt.
Be nice, be accepting, and also if you are feeling like you are not fitting in society, if you feel like you're lost or you feel like there's no other answer than to end your life, there is always hope. There are always people out there who will accept you for who you are. And there is always going to be a community for you. And I know you've probably heard that a million times, but
it's true.
It's true. So we just want you to take today's story, take it to heart, and we'll catch you next week.
Catch you next week. Don't forget your gas mask.
And the next time you come, bring a shovel.
Yeah, can you... I'm kind of hungry in here.
I've been hungry for days.
I've been hungry since we got buried.
Oh, cat. Have a good one.
Is it a cat scratching on the coffin?
Yes.
Yo, get us out. We got to convince this cat to unbury us.
Let's go, Magpie. Let's go.
Bye.
Bye.
At 2 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, multiple unidentified objects were confirmed to have entered Earth's atmosphere. It is speculated that these objects are of extraterrestrial origin. The broadcast will quiet at this time for your safety. Continue to carry out the following instructions.
Radio Grave is hosted by Amber Byland and Dominique Makasuya. Music courtesy of AOA Music, Carl Casey at White Bat Audio, and intro music by Simon Bickbyler. Audio mixing and editing by Amber Byland. Logo and cover art by Dominique Makasuya. All other media and sound clips used are protected under fair use and are for the purpose of criticism, commentary, news reporting, education, and research. Thanks for listening. Goodbye.